J. Schumpeter has presented a detailed analysis of the origin, operation, and the evaluation of capitalism. His analysis offers in-depth insights into the dynamics of capitalist system. The twin concepts of innovation and entrepreneurship, which he evaluated, became powerful tools to understand the process of economic growth in earlier phase of economic development. Schumpeterian analysis is institutional in the sense that it deals not only with any specific institution called capitalism, but the capitalism of specific order, an order in which free competition, private property, and banking institutions prevail. After studying this module, you shall be able to know about the Schumpeter's theory, understand a mathematical interpretation of his model, and understand the process of decay of capitalism. Now let us begin the theory by discussing the concept of circular flow. Schumpeter begins his analysis of development process with the concept of circular flow, which implies a condition where economic activity produces itself continuously at a constant rate through time. It means a continuous activity characterizing a stationary state. Circular flow is based upon a state of perfect competitive equilibrium in which costs are equal to revenue and prices to average cost. The main features of circular flow are, first, that all economic activities are essentially repetitive and follow a familiar routine course. Secondly, all the producers know the aggregate demand for goods and adjust the supply of output accordingly. Thus, demand and supply are in equilibrium at each point of time. Thirdly, the economic system has the optimum level of output and its maximum use, and there is no possibility of wastage of resources. Fourth, the firms working in a system are in a state of competitive equilibrium. Lastly, under the stationary equilibrium, the prices are equal to the average cost of production and thus profits are zero. Interest rate tends to be zero and there is less possibility of involuntary unemployment of resources. These features imply that circular flow is used in a static setting. To make it dynamic and consistent with development, changes must take place in the flow system, which can be brought through innovations. Now, what are innovations? They are change in existing production system to be introduced by the entrepreneur with a view to make profits and reduce costs. The innovation is closely linked with Schumpeterian concept of development. He defined development as, and I quote, spontaneous and discontinuous change in the channels of flow, disturbance of equilibrium, which forever alters and displaces the equilibrium state previously existing, unquote. When changes take place in the economy, circular flow is disturbed and the development process starts. Thus, change is the basic element of dynamic process that comes in the form of innovations. Any innovation may consist of either the introduction of a new product, the introduction of a new method of production, the opening up of a new market, the conquest of a new source of supply of raw materials or semi-manufactured goods, the carrying out of the new organization of an industry. The new combinations of these factors are essential for the development process to start. It is to be energized by the development agents, that is, innovators or entrepreneurs. So, an entrepreneur or innovator is the key figure in Schumpeter's analysis of the process of development. He occupies the central place in the development process because he initiates development in a society by breaking the continuity in the system. It is important to know that entrepreneurship is different from managerial activity in a way that manager simply directs production under existing techniques, but entrepreneurship requires the introduction of something new. An entrepreneur is also different from a capitalist. The capitalist simply furnishes the funds while the entrepreneur directs the use of these funds. The entrepreneur is motivated by, first, the desire to found a commercial kingdom. Secondly, the will to conquer and prove his superiority. And third, the joy of creating, getting things done, or simply of exercising one's energy and ingenuity. Two things are necessary for the entrepreneurial function. Firstly, technical know-how should be available to the entrepreneur for introducing new products and new combinations of production factors. Professor Schumpeter observes that it is no part of his function to find or create new possibilities. They are always present, abundantly accumulated by all sorts of people. The second thing is the capital resource, which can enable the entrepreneurs to have command over factors of production. For this, he needs credit and capital, which can be borrowed from banks and other financial institutions. Thus, credit and bank plays a vital role in economic development. An important question at this point is, what motivates innovation? An entrepreneur innovates to earn profits. Profits are conceived as a surplus over costs, a difference between the total receipts and outlay as a function of innovation, because under competitive equilibrium, the price of each product just equals its cost of production and there are no profits. Profit arises due to dynamic changes resulting from an innovation. They continue to exist till the innovation becomes general. Now moving on to discuss the breakage of this circular flow. As said earlier, Schumpeter regards economic development as a dynamic and discontinuous process. The society progresses through trade cycles. That is why the entrepreneurial activity appears in a swarm-like fashion. The swarm-like appearance of entrepreneurs is responsible for cyclical nature of economic growth. In order to break the circular flow, the innovating entrepreneurs are financed by bank credit expansion. Since investment in innovation is risky, they must be paid bank interest on it. Once the innovation becomes successful and profitable, other entrepreneurs follow it in a swarm-like clusters. Innovations in one field may induce other innovations in related fields. For example, the emergence of a motor car industry may in turn simulate a wave of new investments in the construction of highways, rubber tires, in petroleum products, etc. But the spread is never 100%. The spread of innovation can be explained with the help of a figure where percentage of a firm is taken along y-axis and time is along x-axis. The curve OL represents that firm adopts an innovation slowly to start, but soon the adoption of innovation gains momentum, but it never reaches 100% adoption by firms. Now, let us discuss the cyclical process. Since the investment is assumed to be financed by creation of bank credit, it increases money income and prices and helps to create a cumulative expansion throughout the economy. The increase in purchasing power of consumers increases the demand for the products of the old industries in relation to its supply. Prices rise, profits increase, and old industries expand by borrowing from banks. It induces a secondary wave of credit inflation, which is superimposed on primary wave of innovation. Over-optimism and speculation add further to boom. After a period of gestation, the new products start appearing in the market, replacing the old products and enforcing a process of liquidation, readjustment, and absorption. The demand for old product decreases and there is fall in prices. The old firms contract output. As the innovators start repaying bank loans out of profits, the quantity of money is decreased and prices tend to fall and profits decline. As a result, uncertainty and risk increase. The impulse for innovation is reduced and eventually comes to an end and depression begins. There are always ups and downs in the natural events. Similarly, in the economic activities, there are wave-like movements. The forces that bring about spurt in economic activity and cause boom ultimately get exhausted and create counter forces. At last, ultimately, counter forces gain sufficient strength and power to overcome the original forces. This is how the boom starts fading away, giving place to depression. Schumpeter believes that new units of production enjoy advantage over old units of production when new plants start turning out production. They are naturally attracted by new products and they spend money to purchase those products, while the old plants cut their output or close down and the national output shrinks. Schumpeter describes this process of capitalist development as creative destruction, wherein the old economic structures of society are being continually destroyed and new structures are being continually created in their place. The second reason for the downswing phase is human psychology. Man is greedy by nature, and this makes him overambitious and optimistic about future events. When an entrepreneur makes profit out of his investment, he thinks that he can go on making profit forever without realizing the uncertainties and risks involved in business. And as a result, investment starts falling. It creates backward multiplier effect. Income begins to decrease, purchasing power shrinks, and price fall, and the stage of depression is reached. Schumpeter's cyclical process of development is illustrated by a diagram given as the secondary wave is superimposed on the primary wave of innovation. With over-optimism and speculation, development proceeds more rapidly in prospective phase. When recession starts, the cycle continues downward below equilibrium level to dispersion phase, and ultimately another innovation brings revival. Thus, entrepreneurs play a key role in Schumpeterian analysis. They bring economic development in a spontaneous and discontinuous manner. And cyclical savings are the cost of economic development under capitalism, a permanent feature of its dynamic path. Depression goes on for some time on its own momentum till the economy gets a new position of stability. Once stability is attained, a new swarm of innovators appear with a new sense of confidence and optimism. the innovators start making investment in the hope of making profits, and in this way, the economy gathers momentum to move on the path of progress and development. Thus, business cycle forms an integral part of development theory. Next, we will understand the decay of capitalism. The continuous technical progress results in an unbound increase in total and per capita output. As long as technical progress takes place, the rate of profit is positive. Hence, there can be no drying up of source of investable funds, nor any vanishing of investment opportunities. There is, therefore, no prior ceiling to the level of per capita income in a capitalist society. Nevertheless, the economic success of capitalism will eventually lead to its decay. The very success of capitalism undermines the social institutions which protect it and inevitably creates conditions in which it will not be able to live and which strongly point to socialism as the heir apparent. Schumpeter holds a very pessimistic view about the survival of capitalism. He advocated capitalist system of production, yet he was not unaware of the weakness of the system. Due to its drawbacks, capitalism disintegrates and yields place to socialism. Professor Schumpeter observes, the success of early captain of industry has made innovation a routine activity. It tends to degenerate into a depersonalized routine activity, carried on a big business through highly trained managers. The new lords of businesses are managers, depersonalized owners, and private bureaucrats. This reduces the industrial bourgeoisie to a class of wage earners and thus undermines the function and position of the entrepreneur as the warrior knight. Another factor responsible for weakening the foundations of capitalism is the destruction of its institutional framework. The entrepreneur, by his own success, tends to destroy not only his economic and social functions, but also the institutional framework within which he works. The tendency towards concentration and increase in the size of production unit destroy capitalistic institutions like private property and freedom of contract. In case of big concerns, the proprietors are small and large shareholders who are dematerialized and defunctionalized by professional and salaried managers, and thus the proprietary interest is replaced by large and small stockholders. These changes tend to weaken the concept of private property and free individual contract. Thirdly, the destruction of protecting political strata will administer the last blow to capitalist system. With the progress of capitalism, not only the functions of the entrepreneur and the institutional framework of capitalism crumble, but the group that protected early capitalism politically is also destroyed. The very success of capitalism is destroyed by the royal power. The progress of capitalism makes industrialists and merchants economically powerful, and they begin to dominate political field. The success of capitalism also creates active hostility against its own social order. He observes that the above factors simply weaken the economic and social foundation of capitalism, but they are not sufficient to destroy the system. The capitalist is given more intellectual freedom and more means to practice his freedom. By extending educational facilities, capitalism increases the supply of educated and white-collar groups. Capitalism also creates a labor movement. Here, the intellectual finds a ready-made class to which he can provide intellectual leadership. The class conflict, industrial disputes, economic inequality, exploitation, frictions and frustration among the working groups are some of the factors which disrupt the capitalism. According to Schumpeter, the breakdown of capitalism would come only from the lack of appreciation of what capitalism can do. Schumpeter can be thus regarded as a prophet of doom of capitalism. Let us now discuss the mathematical interpretation of Schumpeter's ideas. Like classical and Marx's models, the Schumpeter model can be explained with the help of certain mathematical equations which are based on certain propositions. The first proposition is that the production function is same as in the classical economy. That is, O is a function of L, K, Q and T, where O is output, L is labor force, K is capital stock and T is technology. The second proposition is that savings depend upon wages, profits and interest rate, wherein the savings of the workers and capitalists increase as their income rises. Schumpeter retained the neoclassical proposition that savings tend to rise with the increase in interest rate. The equation can be written as S equals to W capital R and small r, where S is saving, W wages, capital R is profit and small r rate of interest. Third proposition is that total investment is the aggregate of induced investment and autonomous investment, wherein induced investment is stimulated by increase in income, output, sales and profits, etc. Autonomous investment, on the other side, is influenced by technological change, scientific discoveries, etc. And so I is equal to I subscript I, which is induced investment, plus I subscript A, which is autonomous investment. The fourth proposition is that induced investment depends upon the level of profits and interest rate. Induced investment tends to rise with the increase in profits and tends to fall as interest rate goes up. As this gap widens, the capital accumulation will induce investment. Fifth proposition is autonomous investment depends on resource discovery and technical progress. Professor Schumpeter had laid great emphasis on innovation. Innovation can be in the form of discovery and technical progress, which determines autonomous investment. So I subscript A is a function of K and T, where K is discovery and T is technological progress. The sixth and seventh proposition are that technological progress and rate of resource discovery depend on the supply of entrepreneurs. Eighth proposition is the supply of entrepreneurs depends on the rate of profits and social climate. Schumpeter recognizes that capability of an individual depend upon social climate. The relationship between supply of entrepreneurs, profits and social climate is expressed as E as a function of R and X, where R are profits, X is social climate and E supply of entrepreneurs. Ninth proposition suggests that GNP depends upon relationship between savings and investment and supermultiplier. An excess of investment over saving will raise GNP through multiplier effect. The increase in GNP will be some multiple of gap between investment and savings, that is O equals to R I minus S, where O is gross national output, R multiplier, I investment and S savings. The 10th proposition suggests that the wage bill depends upon the level of investment and that there is direct relationship between wage income and investment. 11th proposition suggests that the social climate is reflected by distribution of income. the ratio of profits to wages is a shorthand expression influencing social climate. If income distribution raises the level of profits of the entrepreneurs, then that will create favorable social climate for development and vice versa. X equals to a ratio of R by W, where X is social climate and R by W is ratio of profits to wages. An increase in this ratio will favorably affect the social climate. Proposition 12 suggests that GNP is equal to profits plus wages. And to close the system, a familiar identity is used as O equals to R plus W, where O again is GNP, R profits and W wages. As this system contains 12 equations and 12 unknowns, thus it can be called a determinate system. Next, we will discuss the critical appraisal of the theory. The Schumpeterian analysis of economic development is modified and a refined version of Marx's model of growth. His theory is based on the development experiences of capitalist countries during 18th and 19th century. He correctly emphasized the role of entrepreneur in the development of capitalism. Entrepreneurs were the prime movers of development process, and innovations played an important role in the development of capitalism. Despite all this, the theory is criticized on certain grounds. The first being that the role of innovator is emphasized. So for Schumpeter, the role of innovator is the prime mover of economic development. Innovations are one of the many factors causing cyclical fluctuations in a capitalistic economy. The functions of innovators in the large business corporations are performed by a large and changing number of individuals. It is difficult to differentiate their innovating activity from their ordinary business activity. The innovational activities have become a matter of routine these days, and there is no need of special agent like innovator for carrying on such activities. Thus, Schumpeter has over-glorified the role of innovator in his model. Secondly, the role of savings is ignored. Schumpeter assumed that innovations are financed by bank credit, and this assumption is not much convincing as banks usually grant short-term loans. But the innovations and development activities require long-term loans. The theory ignores the important sources of real savings such as deficit financing, budgetary savings, public borrowings, and other fiscal measures. In present times, savings play a vital role in financing the development projects and innovations. Thirdly, the theory is criticized that the analysis of capitalist process is not convincing because the Schumpeter's broad socio-economic analysis of capitalist process is generally admired. But this theory explains that rational behavior of innovators and intellectual class is responsible for the success of capitalism. The Schumpeter's hero, that is innovator or entrepreneur, is a forward-looking man in economic matters. But in social and political field, he may be quite inept and weak. The entrepreneur may not be capable of adjusting to political changes. It is therefore not convincing that capitalist process always works on the basis of rationality and dispassionate ideas. Fourthly, the emergence of socialism is not based on sound reasoning. Schumpeterian analysis about the emergence of socialism is provocative, yet it seems to be one-sided and overemphasized. He himself is not quite sure about the way in which socialism will take place of capitalism. According to Schumpeter, the changing condition of the capitalism may be finally replaced by a system different from socialism. Thus, it is very difficult to conclude. Moving on to discuss the theory and the UDCs, the Schumpeter's theory forms the foundation stone of modern thinking. on the problem of development. Yet his analysis is not applicable to underdeveloped countries due to the reasons. First, that the theory is not applicable to socialist countries. This theory is not applicable to majority of underdeveloped countries which has socialist system. For example, the introduction of social security measures and highly progressive income taxes are harmful to the development of an entrepreneurial class because they tend to reduce the profits. Secondly, the institutional change and innovations are not needed. In underdeveloped countries, the class innovation is very small due to small extent of market and low expectation of profit. In poor countries, the government is the biggest innovator. He observed that for sustained growth, there should be combination of several factors like organizational structures, business practices, skilled labor, and appropriate values, attitudes, and motivation. Thirdly, Schumpeter's analysis rests on existence of entrepreneurial class, but underdeveloped countries lacks inadequate entrepreneurship. In such economies, profits are low, and low state of technology does not enhance innovational investments in new plant. Moreover, the lack of adequate power, transport, skilled personnel act as disincentives to entrepreneurial activity. Different socio-economic order. Underdeveloped countries have got a socio-economic structure which is entirely different from the socio-economic order that prevailed in Western Europe and America in 18th and 19th centuries, and which has been the basis of Schumpeterian analysis of problem of development. In these centuries, certain essential of growth like economic and social overheads, suitable attitudes and values for economic development already existed, but in underdeveloped countries, such essentials do not exist. Next, the Schumpeterian analysis is production oriented and the development process is consumption oriented. This is applied in the current trend towards the welfare state in which demand and consumption play a leading role. The next point is that Schumpeter's theory is also inapplicable to underdeveloped countries because it neglects the effect of growth of population on wealth. In these countries, the rate of population growth is the main hurdle in the process of development, and any theory that neglects population cannot be very useful to them. Schumpeter's theory also neglects external factors. The development in any country is due to the changes that arise from within the economy. But in underdeveloped countries, changes do not take place from within the economy. Rather, they are outcome of imparted ideas, technology, and capital. Schumpeter's theory provides an unsatisfactory explanation of inflationary forces. As in this theory, the inflationary impulses form an integral part of the process of development, but it involved no secular inflation. The long-term prices are stable. In an underdeveloped country, inflationary forces are very powerful. Social demand through political and labor union channels seek to extract from the economy more than what can be made to yield through domestic production and international trade. Lastly, the assimilation of innovation. The development process in underdeveloped countries is based not on innovations but on existing innovations. For example, entrepreneurs in underdeveloped countries are not in position to innovate. Rather, they adapt innovations taking place in advanced countries. Let us now recapitulate what we have learned through the module. Firstly, initially any economy follows a circular path of development that is broken by entrepreneurs. Secondly, Schumpeter's theory provides great importance to role of entrepreneurs and innovations. Thirdly, innovations are financed by bank credit and are induced by desire to attain profits. Schumpeter describes the process of capitalist development as creative destruction, wherein the old economic structures of society are being continually destroyed and new structures are being continually created in their place. Ultimately, capitalism disintegrates and yields place to socialism. Lastly, though Schumpeter's theory forms the foundation stone of modern thinking on the problem of development, yet whether his analysis is applicable to underdeveloped countries or not is debatable.